Hi, my name is Lisa Lampe, and I'm a member of the faculties of Adult Psychiatry, Consultation Liaison Psychiatry, and Psychotherapy. So that should give you a bit of an idea of the range of my interests. But more recently, I've been mainly employed as a full-time academic psychiatrist with responsibilities for teaching medical students and trainees and JMOs. When I was asked by the college to make one of these videos, I agreed quite happily. And then as it got closer to the time, I thought, what do I know? But I thought about it and I thought, well, I guess what I do know something about is managing anxiety, since that's been my main clinical interest for some time now. We've all been anxious before. Anxiety is normal at times of, in particular, great uncertainty in our lives, and now is no different. There is currently rapid change, and associated with that is a lot of uncertainty as we face something that none of us have ever experienced before. Understanding uncertainty is central to understanding anxiety because they're very closely linked. Humans are not comfortable with anxiety, and we work very hard to find explanations for things and to come up with explanations when we don't have the real facts for things, which is probably what explains a lot of the theories that circulate so readily on social media and the internet about why things are happening. So, understanding that uncertainty is triggering a lot of anxiety can be very helpful because we can think about strategies to try and manage that are more helpful. I'd like to echo the messages of our college president around understanding and solidarity in the challenges that we're all facing at the moment, both fellows and psychiatrists in training and all who work in the field. And I liked the way he put the need for physical distancing with social connection. I think that's a really good way to put it. And the other concept I like, and I know maybe some people find this a bit hackneyed, but I really like the idea that we're all in this together. And again, I know we're all different, but for me, when I think back to sitting examinations as a medical student, which were probably for me even more anxiety provoking than my exams as a registrar, but my favourite place to sit was actually about two-thirds of the way back and right in the middle, so that all around me I saw a sea of other people in the same situation as I found myself in. And I actually took great comfort from that. So, yeah, I know that that wouldn't suit everybody. Some people would rather just try to pretend the rest of the people weren't there. But for me, that sense of we're all in this together was really quite comforting. Um, what steps can people take to manage anxiety? Well, as I said before, I think there'd be very few of us that were strangers to anxiety. There've probably been a number of times in our lives when, because of the circumstances we faced, we actually had a lot of anxiety. When I think back to my own medical career, I can remember just how anxiety provoking those first few weeks and really months of internship were, where I suddenly felt the weight of what I didn't know, a possibly inflated sense of responsibility, and that created a lot of anxiety. So, uncertainty is part of it. Confidence about being able to control things can contribute. But I guess what is helpful is to think about what have we done before that's worked? And with greater wisdom and maturity, or if we can't draw on those, at least having another crack at it, listening to maybe suggestions that other people make, let's keep the strategies that work and maybe find new strategies to help manage anxiety. So I guess one of the briefs for me today was to identify 5 things that fellows and trainees can do right now. So here's the 5 things I thought of. Number one, maintain flexibility, cognitive flexibility. Physical flexibility is great if you've got it, but what I'm talking about here particularly is cognitive flexibility. In a situation where things can change from one day to the next, even 1 hour to the next sometimes, we often have to very quickly reappraise the situation, modify our goals and our plans. And the more easily and readily we can do that, the more flexible we can be. Actually, as a general rule, not just now at this time, it tends to make life easier. We need to cultivate the ability to adapt and change, and to do that frequently if necessary. But it's also an opportunity to innovate, to try new things, to see opportunities for change. And some of those changes are things that we can probably take forward with us quite helpfully. So they might be changes to the way we work, new hobbies or interests, or new connections that we make at this time. My next tip would be to keep a sense of humour. Obviously, humour has to be appropriate, and that can be a challenge sometimes. In cognitive behaviour therapy for anxiety, we try to employ humour because if you can laugh at something, it inherently means that you're able to step back from it a little and take another look from it and create a little bit of emotional distance for yourself and a little bit of space in which to take a more problem solving approach, a more effective and problem solving approach. So keep your sense of humour. Learn how to manage worry would be my third tip. So worry can be helpful if it is part of, or if it is more properly, a problem solving activity. That is, it is focused on a problem. We consider solutions, we weigh up the pros and cons, we plan an action, and we plan to evaluate how effective that option was. But worry can become unproductive, going over and over a problem or difficulty that can't be solved because we don't have enough information or it's beyond our control to solve. The thing to be a bit careful about is it can become a habit. So, worry is probably a cognitive linguistic strategy to manage uncertainty, and it's easy to have a lot of perhaps subconscious beliefs about worry being helpful because it helps us cover all the bases, it helps us come up with a solution. And as I say, if it's more appropriately a problem solving activity, a cognitive problem solving activity, then it certainly can be helpful. But just worry and rumination, particularly when it starts to interfere with our ability to get sleep or to focus on something else, or starts to focus us so much on threat and uncertainty that we get even more stressed and anxious, then it's not helpful. So there are more helpful approaches. They generally are more problem focused approaches, but also the stress management approaches that I'll also talk about. And there are also some cognitive strategies that you can learn to manage worry if it's already become a habit for you. My fourth tip is keep up healthy behaviours as much as possible. As we all know, at times of stress and anxiety, it can feel like just one more thing to do some exercise or do some relaxation or practice some yoga or meditation or whatever it might be. So we're actually most tempted to let go of those strategies at the times when we probably need them most. So I would encourage you to try to maintain the healthy strategies, the healthy coping strategies and behaviors that you already have. And think about other strategies that can be helpful, other cognitive, emotional, social, and behavioral strategies that help you manage stress. And finally, stay connected and work hard at treating the people you love well. Again, when we're stressed, it is sometimes hard to save our emotional energy and our extra efforts for those that we actually love most and should be treating best in our lives. So I think that's probably a challenge for us all at the best of times, but particularly important now because they also need our support. What can someone do to support those around them who are dealing with anxieties at work or at home? Well, I think one of the most important things is to realize that we all have a different tolerance for uncertainty. Some of us see a 1 in 100 chance as being absolutely negligible, and others might see it as being too high a risk to possibly take. So we all have a different spot on the spectrum of tolerance of uncertainty. We also need to recognise that we all differ in terms of how sensitive and reactive we are to things that happen in our environment and in our relationships. Some people get distressed and upset much more easily by things than others. And finally, I think we all have differences in how readily we express distress and in what manner we express distress. So as we know from when we work as psychiatrists, this applies in our relationships with our colleagues and people who are close to us in life, that we also have to try to tailor our response in the context of understanding how they are as individuals and how they might differ from us, and to try and think about how we can best help them in a way that matches their own personality, temperament, and sensitivities. I would also suggest that we need to be a role model for carrying on in spite of being stressed and anxious. A great resource for anxious patients for a long time now has been the book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And of course, as we all know, that's the essence of courage, in fact, is carrying on in spite of being quite frightened about doing something. So we can try to model that aspect of, yes, I'm anxious, I'm feeling quite stressed, but I'm going to carry on. And I guess one of the other things that we probably have learned from our working lives is that it's normal to go through periods of heightened stress and demand. And usually that gets balanced out by periods where the load lightens a bit. And of course, if it doesn't, it's something that we need to try to do something about. So understanding that we can try and role model carrying on and waiting for the better times. Encourage others to explore those physical, emotional, cognitive, and behavioral coping strategies that we might have found helpful, but understand that they'll also have to find the ones that work for them. But at least exposing people to some resources and some ideas can be quite helpful. And of course, more help is available. There are some great online resources for managing anxiety and, in particular, perhaps worry these days. And I'd also recommend that you share those resources with people who might benefit from them. And of course, you can do it while maintaining a physical distance, as we're all learning to use this new technology to deliver some of the interactions that we used to enjoy face to face. So I'm no expert at managing pandemics. This is an experience that none of us have really had before, but I hope that some of these tips on managing stress and anxiety might be of some value as we all wait and see what each day brings.